So there I am, watching the show about a couple living in a home where something paranormal might be happening, and one of the main characters is named James. And as scary things keep happening, I keep wondering, are we ever going to get a Wendy Williams reference?
What was that? Okay, James.
What was that? Okay, James. Hi, my name's Eric, and here on my YouTube channel, I cover theme parks, events, and theater in SoCal, and I want to talk to you tonight about Paranormal Activity live on stage, or properly, Paranormal Activity, a new story live on stage, because this is a new theatrical work set inside of the Paranormal Activity universe. Now, you may have heard of Paranormal Activity. It's one of the most popular, prolific film franchises of, I would say, maybe the last 20 years. These films are known for using found footage to give you frights and scares. They're also known for being sometimes very boring movies. One of the most iconic images from the film series is just a bedroom in the dark with an open doorway looking into a hallway. Not initially scary at first, but when you bring it to life with tension, with quietness, when you bring it to life with loud bumps that make you go, I don't know where that came from. Well, it turns out that can be a recipe for not only scares, but also lots and lots of money. So, of course, it made sense. Why not bring that to the stage? And that is what's happening right now at the Ahmanson Theater through December 7th. You can see this new adaptation that brings the movies to life on stage. Now, this new play, written by Levi Holloway and directed by Felix Barrett, is not necessarily a direct adaptation of the Paranormal Activity films. I would say it borrows heavily from several different films in the franchise, most particularly the first one. The first movie being about a couple newlywed with some troubles. This play is also about a couple newlywed with some troubles, with a new setting. Now, they're in London town, and it's raining all the time. And, well, you know, they're trying to adjust to their new homes, but Louise and James, the couple at the center of the play, have what you might call a few skeletons in their closet. Or should we say demons? Now, when this show was first announced to be coming to Los Angeles, I was initially very intrigued. Not only because of the IP that it was based on, but just because it was a horror film in general being adapted to the stage. I think horror is quite a tricky thing to pull off successfully. I've seen many plays that attempt to scare you, but have never really rubbed me in an uncomfortable way. For me, oftentimes when it comes to horror theater, the plays that I see often seem to be more interested in scaring you. And by scaring you, sometimes it just means jump scaring you, but not actually building in dread or tension or using all the tools available to them that you can use when you have a bunch of people sitting quietly on the edge of their seat when you can hear a pin drop. Interestingly enough, the last time I really saw a horror play that stuck with me was 222, A Ghost Story, which also played at the Ahmanson Theater. And I wasn't a huge fan of the play itself in terms of its writing, but I was a fan of the clever ways in which the show tried to scare me. And I would say when it comes to Paranormal Activity on stage, I was far and away impressed, more so with the playwriting craft on display than I was the scares, which were also, I thought, very successful. Now, the writer, Levi Holloway, he had his previous work, The Grey House, on Broadway back in 2023. I did not get to see it, but clearly he already has horror theater in his wheelhouse. But what was really exciting to me about this show when I heard it was coming was its director, Felix Barrett, who is previously the artistic director of Punch Drunk Theater. They are the company that brought Sleep No More to life, one of the most prolific, immersive, semi-horror productions that has really ever existed on the scale that it did. So obviously, if you have a writer who is known for bringing scares to the stage and a director who's known for bringing very unsettling, creepy, immersive experiences to life, well, I had my expectations set pretty high for this show. Now, coming into this, I did, in fact, go back and rewatch the first Paranormal Activity movie. And in my opinion, you don't necessarily need to know much about the films if you haven't seen them to enjoy this show, nor do I think that those original movies hold up with the time. I feel like they were successful in sort of springboarding found footage horror, especially indie found footage horror, into the mainstream, even more so than movies like The Blair Witch Project, which uses similar filmmaking style. Paranormal Activity, though, when you go back and watch them now, are more interesting to think about and talk about than I think they are to watch. That first movie was made on a stupidly small shoestring budget, but also is one of the most financially successful films of all time because of its shoestring budget compared to its massive, massive box office returns. And the strength of that movie ended up being the minimalist aspect of its scares. And that minimalist aspect is what brings Paranormal Activity to life on stage live better than I think most people were anticipating it was going to be. This show is so quiet until it's not. One of the first signs that this show is really going to mess with your head is its very, very start. The show starts in complete pitch blackness and then suddenly assaults your ears with some of the loudest Radiohead you've ever heard. Now, I love Radiohead, but not when it's so loud it almost makes my ears bleed. But it's a perfect way of showing you how Paranormal Activity, live on stage, is going to deprave your senses until it overwhelms you. But what is the show even about? Well, it is about Lou and it is about James. They recently have moved to London, James for his job, and Lou to escape some things back in the US that were giving her trauma. We find out throughout the show that Louise has been dealing with quite a difficult childhood upbringing and quite a difficult adulthood. She's taking medications to deal with her depression and anxiety. She's dealing with losing time. She's dealing with sleepwalking. She's dealing with not remembering how she ends up in places. And while James' lovely partner that he's trying to be doesn't quite know how to listen to her problems as much as he knows how he thinks he can fix her problems. And that struggle in this relationship about two people who don't truly know how to listen to or hear each other ends up compounding some of the more literal problems that really begin to invade their lives as this show is going on in this home that may be haunted. Or is it the home? Or is it the people inside the home? After all, the tagline of this show is "Places aren't haunted, people are." Now, Lou and James are played by Cher Alvarez and Patrick Hausinger. They are quite, I believe they are so well cast in this show, especially as a couple with a very believable dynamic. For as much as these two can quabble in the show, they also have just as many moments where they really do seem to care about each other, even if they don't always know how to be there for each other. Cher, who plays Lou, especially has the task of really selling that there is this inevitable dread that constantly lives inside of her. And maybe it is just a depression, or maybe, as she believes, it is something a little more darker and a little more possessive that haunts her. Patrick Hausinger as James is wonderful as this very strong, corn-fed Southern boy who wants to be the big man in their relationship, wants to be the protector, but spends a little too much time looking for solutions to problems rather than just listening to them. He's able to ride this very fine balance of a man in a relationship who you really feel like is just screwing everything up, but you cannot help but root for him and love him, even with all of the mistakes that he's making along the way. And I think that Patrick does a wonderful job letting you live in both worlds of disliking this man very much and also really kind of trusting him regardless of how much he tends to be making mistakes in this relationship. Now, there's two other actors who are featured in this show. Shannon Cochran plays Carol Ann, who is James's mother, a character who we see mostly through FaceTime Zoom calls over a TV screen, but has a few things to do in person on stage a little bit later on in the show. We also have Kate Fry as Ethelyn Cotgrave. She is a medium who we find out is the host of this supernatural podcast, who is also the tone setter of the show. The show begins in complete darkness, but we hear the beginning of an episode of this character Ethelyn's podcast where she's speaking about the concept of places not being haunted as much as people are. And also, it's her that introduces one of the most interesting thematic elements of the show, which is the concept of Eigengraw, the idea that the color behind your eyelids when your eyes are closed is actually a real color. Eigengraw, what you see in the absence of darkness. Now, we as an audience are immersed in Eigengraw. After all, the play starts in complete darkness, but oftentimes the set itself is completely eclipsed by darkness. We can only see the faintest shadows and outlines of a character walking across the stage while we in the audience are sitting with our eyes turned up to 11 trying to process what we're seeing, even though the stage is so dark. And actually, I do want to talk about the set for this show. The set by Klye Davis, who also did the costumes for this show, to me is the best example of why I think this show works in its transition from film to stage. The stage is a big, basically think of like a dollhouse. You have a bottom floor where you see the kitchen and living room. You have a staircase in the back that goes up, and then you can also see a hallway, a bedroom, and a bathroom. So imagine like a kid's play set. You can see all of the rooms of this house at once. And oftentimes throughout the show, characters will be downstairs having a scene in the living room, but we can still see what's going on upstairs. And oftentimes, nothing's going on upstairs until something is happening upstairs. And that is that feeling of Eigengraw, of sometimes the things that are in the peripheral of the darkness of the set is where our eyes are most fixated on, because we're sitting there waiting for something frightening to happen. It's really quite a clever trick, because the Paranormal Activity movies are often always about sitting in silence, scanning every corner of the frame, and waiting for the moment of terror to happen. And you are doing this for the entire 2-hour runtime of this show. And even though the show really does take its time to unveil its darkest aspects, man, when you get scared, you are so, first of all, relieved, because it's that releasing of tension, but it's also that feeling of, oh my God, they got me. And they always get you where you were least expecting it. I dare not spoil some of the most impressive moments of this show when it comes to scaring you, because there's a lot of misdirection. There's a lot of, I would say, stage magic, but that sounds reductive, because the effect that these moments have once they do pay off, while they may not be the most expensive special effects you've ever seen, they are the most effective uses of some very, very clever lighting tricks and illusions. I want to say what happens so bad. If you've seen the show, you'll know that there's a moment that happens about halfway through the first act. And I'll just say that it involves a record playing on a record player. And both the main actors, Cher Alvarez and Patrick Hausinger, do an excellent job at misdirecting your attention so that this trick can be pulled off. And when it comes to pulling off these very magical moments of paranormal activity live on stage in front of your eyes, it's where I think the show proves that it is far more intelligent in the way that it treats its audience. It doesn't give you cheap scares. It doesn't give you scares that are merely jump scares, but it gives you scares that are justified within the context of what's happening in the story, and gives you scares that are also very valid reliefs from the tension that the show has been building in its moments of quiet. And that's not to say that this show is a roller coaster. It is a roller coaster eventually, but it really does take its time setting up a very successful and very believable couples dynamic between Lou and James. So that way, when scary things are happening, you feel for them as much as you kind of feel like that these people kind of had what's coming. Now, if the first act of this show can be a bit of a slow burn, the second act of this show is an absolute inferno. There really is a delineation between the first act being the setup and the second act being the payoff, or rather, the scares you paid money to see. Because I would say Act 2 goes from 0 to 100 and kind of stays at 100 for its entire fairly short 45-minute length. That is where the lighting design by Anna Watson and the sound design by Gareth Frey really shine, because, like I said, there's a lot of moments of darkness, but there's often a tiny little sliver of light that focuses in that darkness on the set that just your eyes immediately go to. Or there's moments of absolute silence until there's moments of like absolute decibel breaking loudness, particularly from a very fussy Alexa that is plugged into the kitchen of this home. There's also impressively minimalist video design by Luke Hall in the show. I mentioned earlier Shannon Cochran, who plays Carol Ann, James's mother, is featured over a FaceTime call put on a TV that's in the living room of this home. And it does this thing where watching the show, I couldn't necessarily tell if this video call was being done live or not. Are the actors speaking to a live video of this actor backstage holding a phone up to her face? Or is this a video recording that they just have really got their timing down on? I don't know. I have to watch the show again and a little more closely decide what I think's going on there. But those video elements come into play later on when, of course, like any good ghost haunting a home would do, you turn on the TV and you play something a little spooky on it. Or you send messages from the beyond onto the TV. And it's never done in a hokey way, and it's never done in a, Tales from the Crypt, unbelievable kind of way. It's done in a, did my smart TV actually mean to put on the thing it just put on? Or is this a demon from hell telling me that I need to get out of my house? There's also some very interesting shadow work that happens in the show, where you are seeing something that you think is the shadow of an actor, but is actually the shadow of a video of the shadows move independently of people in ways that you're not expecting. Oh, I hope I'm not spoiling too much. I just was so impressed by how they pulled this show off. Now, ultimately, I do think that this show sticks the landing while also being a bit confusing. Like any good horror story, these characters at the center of it face an unbelievable challenge, and oftentimes are met with a very grim fate. And I'm not going to say exactly what happens at the end of the show, but I will just say that I don't think I'm the only one who was left wanting a little bit more resolution in favor of ending on a big wow moment. I like the way that the characters are written so much that I do think in some ways the play does them a disservice by not giving them entirely fulfilling conclusions. But that's also a problem that I have with the movies from Paranormal Activity. So while that may have been them sticking to the way that stories play out in those movies, I do think that there could have been an opportunity here to come a little bit full circle instead of 8/9 of the way of a full circle. But at the end of the day, people are coming for the scares. And I do think that this show is very successful in what it's trying to pull off, which is a very fateful tale with some frights that leaves you a little bit scared when you get home at the end of the show. It takes domesticity, and it takes these very normal things that we have in our lives and makes the very average very unaverage, or should I say paranormal. I feel like that's the second time I've done a joke like that in this video. But anyway, did you see Paranormal Activity live on stage at the Ahmanson Theater? It's playing right now through December 7th. It is going to San Francisco after the new year, and is also in the new year getting a second production in the West End. So it seems like while the show may be haunted by ghosts long past, the show may have a very bright future in front of it. So if you're going to see it, and if you already have seen it, tell me what you think down below. And thank you for watching this video review. I'm going to go unplug all my Alexas now. Bye.